Don't forget to register for the MEF-POCs at mef.net/POC. Sounds like an awesome program showing some really cool things. Well, thanks for joining me back on the edge as we prepare to take our first deep dive of the day. And I promise it won't be scary if we all jump together. And I think our sketch artist, Matt, might be jumping in here too. Our first session is delivering on SD-WAN expectations, application performance, visibility, control, and security. Partnering with us to bring clarity, strategy, and expertise, please welcome John Ish, Director Connectivity Solutions for Orange Business Services, as well as Peter Kopens, Vice President of Product Portfolio of Colt Technology Services, and Willie Guru, Manager of Product Development of T-Mobile. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Awesome.
Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome. So good to see all of you. And thanks for starting us off with this episode of the Deep Dive session. So let's jump in. Let's get us started. If you would, please, Peter, John, and Willie, could you briefly share a highlight of your professional role as well as your company's approach to SD-WAN?
Sure. So I'm the VP product at Colt. So includes a complete product life cycle from innovation, understanding the requirements, and then the development and the launch of the capability. So Colt has a portfolio of traditional network services, think optical wavelength, Ethernet, internet access, voice services, and then also the newer software-defined networking-centric services like SD-WAN being one of them. So Colt, at least in Europe, was one of the early movers on SD-WAN with the launch already over 5 years ago now in what I would call a true SD-WAN from day one, based on a generic wide server as a CPE box, central control, and full visibility. And maybe to finalize, SD-WAN at Colt today is our fastest growing network service in our complete portfolio. And it's one of the services where customers and the market are pushing us rather than we having to push the market.
Thank you, Peter. John, jump in for us.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a director of in our connectivity business unit here at Orange Business Services, and much like what Peter just said, the customers are definitely driving in this direction with SD-WAN. We offer SD-WAN in two flavors. We have a fully managed service and an integrated service. The fully managed service is integrated into our global MPLS network. And we have something called the Next Gen Hub where we integrate underlay, overlay, and internet services all in the same spot. Our intent is to provide a seamless integrated network that integrates between the private network, the internet, security, and cloud. You can't talk about SD-WAN without talking about those other four things. Our SD-WAN business today represents something around the neighborhood of 12,000 ports, and we have more than 50 global networks installed today.
Hi, I'm Willie Guru. I'm a product development manager at T-Mobile in the T-Mobile for Business space. Our SD-WAN offerings primarily have been CPE-based, managed CPE-based up until probably the past year. And like most companies, our focus has started to shift towards work from home and work from anywhere, and how we can leverage the 5G networks in the what I would call beyond the core offering of mobility.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. So Peter, I'm going to jump back to the front side and with yourself. If you could share, how would you characterize key enterprise requirements in today's work from anywhere world?
Yeah, sure. And I think Willie already touched on it. So for a service like SD-WAN, that's not that old, 6-7 years ago, no one was talking really about it. The main drivers have evolved quickly. First, it was about cost, replacing MPLS to smaller exotic places. That was the idea. Then it became cloud native, MPLS not being designed from the start to break out locally the traffic, going to the public cloud. Then it became security. And now, of course, in the last 9 months, we have seen definitely another driver, which is the work from home. Before the whole pandemic, the focus of SD-WAN that we did see was definitely mainly on branch sites, headquarters, data centers, the cloud. And home users were part of it, but it was not really central, if I'm honest. if you see now, of course, the massive move to work from home, I haven't seen my office in the last 9 months since March. I haven't been there, and I know probably a lot of you are in the same situation. So a lot of companies had to overnight change it. They have done it, but in some cases, it has been a quick and dirty fix, not a sustainable long-term solution. And now we see a lot of enterprise demand for a more scalable, solid, long-term work-from-home solution embedded in SD-WAN. And that could be both based on tunnel or software client version, or even making the home office as a real branch site. That's not the majority of demand, but still that's something that we now see, having like a branch at home. So definitely, and we come back later on, I think, on all the security requirements that will drive.
And I think, Peter, if I could just jump in there, one thing that you talked about, I definitely see is this kind of, when the pandemic first hit, it was sort of like, hey, make sure everybody can work from home. It was a quick and dirty and get people there. But now we're getting to the point where, the end users aren't accepting that anymore, right? It's not just a month, it's just not just 2 months. If this is going to be a long-term situation, I need to be able to print at home. I need you to be able to help me when I have a problem, not just say, oh, the tunnel's down. So I definitely agree with you there's been an evolution of how to get people to work from home and how comfortable they are with it.
That's a great add-on, John. And Willie, I'm going to jump to you, then I'll do a follow-up on Peter on this one. So let's change slightly. How would you share, Willie, is your company delivering on enterprise SD-WAN expectations? An example being, what is your company doing to help customers deal more effectively with changing modes of network consumption?
Well, and these questions are certainly feeding on each other very well.
They are. Almost like we planned it, right?
As Pete, who wrote these things? This is great. As Peter and John just said, I mean, it's a very interesting thing. SD-WAN has always been, that overlaid network. The carriers have adopted kind of an underlay agnostic approach, and now that we're moving into the work from home, it becomes a little bit more difficult to treat that work from home or work from anywhere user as a branch location in an SD-WAN environment. So I think the push going forward is going to be, like John said, is, how do you do that in a way that makes that mobility user, or makes that, even if it's fixed, like your house, you're always going to, be in one spot. But how do you make that 5G connection a legitimate citizen on an SD-WAN network? How do you treat it like a branch? How do you apply business policies? How do you apply security? How do you adhere to the visibility requirements from the CIO to all of his assets out in the field? So moving in from where we were last year of, let's just make this thing work, of getting everybody connected to a network, to, okay, now with the rollout of 5G, with the expansion of the 5G networks, how do we turn those 5G users into legitimate citizens in an SD-WAN world?
Yeah, no, I can fully agree. And I think maybe another aspect, so getting a bit away from the work from home, is the whole operational models. That's definitely something, if you looked in the past with MPLS-based IPVPNs, the operational model was very crystallized. At least in Europe, over 70% of the enterprises went for a fully managed MPLS network from a network service provider. So an out-tasked kind of model. In the US, it was traditionally a bit less, but still important. Now, operational models on SD-WAN, the fact that we have now this underlay and overlay enabled due to SDN and network function virtualization opens up a whole host of new operational models. Do-it-yourself, enterprise that do both underlay and overlay themselves. Co-managed, where the operator provides the whole infrastructure, keeps it up and running, but then the enterprise can quickly change firewall settings, load balancing, etc. And then fully managed. And at the moment, we see a lot of these models, a lot of hybrids there. It's not fully converged yet, and mostly driven by two things. Does the enterprise have the IT resource and the skills in-house to do it? And is it for them, for the company, is a network a differentiator, or it's always important, but is it just supporting or will differentiate? From a Colt perspective, we're agnostic in this, but it's definitely something that we see happening.
It's interesting. We've always kind of treated the SD-WAN networks as a managed solution. The highest amount of growth has been in managed SD-WAN over the last couple of years. John touched on something a minute ago with the scalability piece of this. When we've looked at SD-WAN in the past and managed CPE devices, that is a completely different proposition from managing the masses. We're going from a scalability of just enterprise locations to now needing to manage millions of subscribers that all come into a network. So how will that shift happen? How will we go from a managed type of solution to a much greater scale of millions of subscribers coming into a network, coming into an SD-WAN network? I think the direction needs to be more of a self-service type environment where a user can come in and set his business policies, or the admin for the enterprise, for instance, could come in and set the business policies, set the rules for those subscribers, so we can continue from a scalability perspective to meet their needs.
Awesome. John, did you have one quick thing to add in there? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Willie, Peter, and I are definitely working in the same space, because I hear reflections on exactly what we're seeing with our customer base. So just wanted to say that.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Willie, I got two short ones for you. And then John, I'm going to flip the screen to you for a little while. But Will, if you could share, will advancement of broadband services and 5G facilitate the move away from branch-centric networks and really force carriers to accelerate network transformation?
Absolutely. And this is exactly what we've been talking about. The promise of 5G is bandwidth and latency, or lower latency. So we're going to see a shift in the traditional access methods, going away and moving more towards a wireless 5G type of environment. Broadband has already pushed us there to a degree, with cable operators and fiber operators to deliver broadband to the small business, to the branch locations, and even to the homes. 5G is just going to accelerate that even more. So both of those two things are absolutely catalysts to moving away from traditional networks and transforming what we offer to our customers. But you can't say that these days without also saying exactly what we've been talking about with 2020 and the pandemic and this sudden need, to move everybody out of the office and into their work environment now being either, work from home or work from somewhere other than the office, right? And from all indication, I don't believe that's going to change. Even post-pandemic, I believe we're going to see a percentage of the people that used to work in an office working from home, or at the very minimum, some type of schedule that an employer brings in part of his employers, into the office on a scheduled basis. So I don't think you're going to see the capacity of people in offices that you once had, and I think we'll need to be able to supply that work from home type environment going forward.
Absolutely. You're going to need to supply. So well said. Well, then continue on, Willie, for a moment. SD-WAN originally was viewed by many as an end to MPLS. Then it was positioned as a way to augment MPLS. Are we moving back to it and replacing MPLS in 2021 with 5G broadband and SD-WAN?
This is probably the hardest question for me to answer, simply because I've been the one trying to sell MPLS networks for the last 20 years. It's not that there's anything wrong with MPLS. There's nothing going on there that would say MPLS is still not viable. It absolutely is, and it is still the best way to have a secure, high-performing network. The fact of the matter is, the workplace has changed. For the last several years, we have been decentralizing the compute power in the network, moving applications into the cloud, now moving applications with MEC to the edge of the network. So as those applications decentralize, we're going to see the need, and I think Peter said this earlier, we're going to see the need to move away from an MPLS network because it's simply not what an MPLS network was designed to do. MPLS is a closed network. It's a private network. And that's just really not the direction that the industry is going from a compute perspective. So I think we'll see MPLS slowly going away. I think what you'll see more and more access from a broadband and a 5G perspective coming in at the access layer, and you'll see your larger locations, your regional and headquarter locations, continuing along with the MPLS networks for a period of time. Ultimately, I guess you could say we would all just have a 5G subscription for our access, and we would all be our own private networks, and all the applications would be in the cloud. I don't think that's going to happen within a year or so. I think that's still years away.
Oh, and I like how you said it, Will. You've been trying to sell it for years. That's why I addressed the question your way.
Yeah, don't take away my MPLS.
No,
just
not
yet.
a chance. Not a chance. How about this, John? I'm putting you in a spotlight for a few questions. Sure. We're coming right at you. So, John, help us understand, how is SD-WAN application visibility and control changing network design and operation?
Right. Well, I think this goes exactly to what Willie was just talking about, right. Is that what we've seen is this migration away from a data center centric environment to a cloud centric environment. And actually, in the beginning days of SD-WAN, we did not have that, right? All we had was the idea that I could save money by moving to SD-WAN, in removing MPLS. And we honestly, to Willie's point, we did not see that happen largely within our customers, with even those that rolled SD-WAN out, that they moved away from MPLS. Now, I agree with Willie that as you get further into cloud and decentralization of compute, you certainly are going to see a difference in how that operates. And what that means from an application performance perspective is, in the past, number one, the destination was probably the data center. So I might have multiple ways to get to the data center, but I'm going to the same spot. So I didn't have to worry so much about how I was getting there. And as well, the methods I could use to make those adjustments were pretty rough, right? I could do IP address or maybe port kind of stuff to make decisions about where I send applications. Now I have not only my applications live in a different environment, they live in the cloud, which is probably not under my 100% control, but also I have the ability with SD-WAN to make those routing decisions much deeper into the application. So the classic one is Office 365. Well, Office 365 is a combination of applications that are real time and those that are not, right? So even within that Office 365 environment, I don't need to treat everything that's happening there the same. I can treat it differently. And I can do that with the application control within SD-WAN. The other important thing, of course, is that by adding the orchestration layer on top, I can do that in a much more quick fashion when I need to change something in my environment. In the old days of PBR, if I had 100 routers, I'd have to make 100 changes. And yeah, I can do scripting and some things to make that simpler, but orchestration makes that instantaneous. Now, I'm not saying our customers necessarily are reaching that instantaneous change constantly kind of mode, and I'm not sure that IT is really ready to handle that, but it's capable and it has expanded the abilities of application performance management within your network.
Thank you, John. I'm always curious when people talk about the old days and 100 changes and 100 routes. And the old days really aren't even that. They're like, how many years ago are the old days anymore?
Yeah, that change has certainly accelerated. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, John, let's stay with it for a moment. Share, how can SD-WAN help with application performance and the cloud, and what are really the restrictions you see?
All right. And so some of these restrictions are based upon the SD-WAN technology you're using. Some SD-WAN technologies require two ends to it. So your overlay has to have a box on the far end in order to do any kind of application control. There are others that, you can do it from one side. So to some degree, and I'm not, in this short format, I don't have time to go into all that, but there are some differences there. But the other, I think one of the critical things that I see, or one of the conversations we have with our customer, and this is specifically or mostly when we're talking about infrastructure as a service, which I see a lot of customers, that's a big engagement with our customers right now, is doing more infrastructure as a service in the cloud, is the decision about where does my overlay end. Is it going to end inside the cloud service provider, or I'm going to end it at the edge before I go into the cloud service provider? And we've done both ways. I would say most of our customers are choosing to end the overlay before it goes to the cloud service provider. So we're essentially in one of those cloud gateways that we have, the next-gen hubs. We'll terminate the overlay network there and then just connect, even if it's a private connection, into the infrastructure as a service provider. Now, I'm not saying every customer is like that. We certainly have launched the virtual instances of SD-WAN gateways inside the cloud service provider. When I talk to cloud service providers about this, they would much rather not have the overlay exist inside their environments because it's defeating some of the routing sitting there. But that's part of the conversation we have with a customer is, let's talk about what these mean, what it means to where your overlay ends, and how is that going to impact your design of the overlay of the overall network.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Peter, I didn't forget about you, so I'm going to jump back to yourself. But John, I'd also like a follow-on this question, if that's all right. Peter, security has emerged as a top priority for those evaluating SD-WAN solutions, of course. What are the key issues that we need to consider when it comes to SD-WAN and security?
Yeah, sure. So I think the drivers are clear. We have been talking about it. The whole work from home is changing the perimeter. And then the whole cloud-centric IT environment means that you break out from your network to the cloud. And that again is changing all your traffic flows. So that old concept of point solutions and individual firewalls with individual, as John was saying, all these policies that you had to manage, that doesn't cut it anymore. So now it's much more about an individual user accessing a specific application across wherever he is. And what we then see is that we see a few things. First of all, security gets much more bundled into SD-WAN than it ever was with MPLS. With MPLS, as was said before, was mostly a closed network, so there was much less need for that security because it was an internal network primarily, not exclusively, but primarily. So with SD-WAN, it's much more prominent. That's one. SD-WAN vendors and security vendors, they are converging. That's what we definitely see in the market. They all have, they're all starting to play in each other's area. And then what we see from customers is that we have to offer choice here. It's not for some things like routing. Customers don't care in general what you offer as long as it's something good. With security, it's more sensitive, so they want to hear some names. So, for example, we have some SD-WAN vendors. They have embedded security, and that's a good solution for a lot of customers. Some other customers like to have Checkpoint or Palo Alto or Fortinet, and they dictate a bit their requirements there. And that's something we then have to enable as a universal CPE concept, that on top, this Checkpoint, Palo Alto, Fortinet, we can deliver as software applications on that generic platform.
Yeah, in that early on in our SD-WAN journey here with customers, we learned that you cannot have an SD-WAN conversation without a security person in the room. I mean, you can, but you're going to have that conversation again, later on down the road when you do that. So that's definitely part of it. Everything Peter said is, 100%. I agree with it. The one thing I would add to it is that what we're seeing as a trend within our customers is historically IT and security operated in sort of two different domains. They had their own idea of what things were going to do. And as this work from home, as SD-WAN, as orchestration has become more relevant with our customers, those two organizations have to work closer together. And it's something that, I can't walk into a customer and say, hey, you got to get your security and IT teams together. But I do, when we walk in and talk about that, we do say that is a key to getting the most out of SD-WAN, the most out of your security. They have to work together. If you look at those in isolation, you're going to miss out in some way. I guarantee it.
You're right. Thank you, John. So before we wrap up, I have one last question for all of you. We'll start with Willie, then go to Peter, end on John. Keep it tight. One thought answer if you can. But tell me, what can enterprises look forward to in terms of SD-WAN innovation in 21?
Well, I think a lot of what John and Peter were just saying is very applicable here. I hope what the audience is hearing here is, we're at that stage with SD-WAN that we are moving away from a CPE type environment totally to at least part of those solutions being in the network. As Peter said a while ago, there's multiple breakout points within the network. So there's on ramps, there's off ramps, there are security concerns all along the way. And then, as John was saying, with how he develops his SD-WAN solutions with infrastructure as a service, there are multiple ways of doing that. But parts of that SD-WAN solution, as most of us predicted, were originally out on the customer prem, and now part of that network is moving inside the carrier's infrastructure.
Yep. And I can add on that. So obviously it's about further expanding the work from home and the security / SASE capabilities beyond what's there already today. And then what was just said, it's also about further going on that whole journey of virtual network functions, so software functions that can live or on the universal CPE, which is at the customer side, or it can live, as was just said, in the network, on a network node, on a server farm. And so here we're thinking about all the stuff like firewalls, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, routing, Cisco, Juniper, WAN optimization, Riverbed, and a very, very long list of other capabilities.
And the only thing I would add to that is, again, it's amazing that Willie and Peter and I, everything that we've said is, I feel good that I'm hearing exactly what I would have said. There's nothing that is contradictory. But the only other thing I would add to this is segmentation. I've seen, we're starting to see our customers think about, okay, I've got SD-WAN deployed. How can I segment my network? And it goes into the SASE model. It goes into this whole concept. But I actually have a customer who's trying to break the entire network, right? So I want east-west security on every connection. And that's a little bit odd for us who have been in the industry a while and thinking about MPLS, any to any. You're inside the network, you're outside the network. Those concepts are going away. And it's more about how do I secure my entire network regardless of where I am in the network.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. I know it was great information and great expertise to be shared with our entire audience here watching. So if you could give him a big round of applause, folks. And once again, thank you to John Ish, Orange Business Services, Peter Copens, Colt Technology Services, and Willie Guru from T-Mobile. They're going crazy for you. Can't you hear them? Can you guys hear them? they're tearing up the chat stream right now. You guys have been fabulous. They are. Hey, everybody, don't go too far as we have Deep Dive Session 2 coming up shortly on evolving SD-WAN as a transformation enabler. And we will see you there.